31st. Okay, it's 9 a.m. on October 31st, and we are maybe not quite to the witching hour, but darn close to it. Going to go ahead and call the Strategic Planning Committee meeting to order. Want to acknowledge that Commissioner Cooney is online, but dealing remotely, and so has asked if I would chair the meeting this morning, and I'm more than happy to do that. And then we have Commissioner Kearns and myself in the office. So first item of business is Kyle Tuwig and Public Works Administrator and Nat Koza. We're going to talk about Chapter 7.4 of the amendments briefing for cable franchise. So Kevin, you're on.
Thank you. I think Matt's going to lead off on this one with the code changes proposed.
Oh my goodness. Look at you.
Yes.
Happy birthday, Jeff.
Is it really your birthday?
Is ad libbing? Good job.
I was wondering what the occasion was.
Yes. Dynamite.
What is it?
Jeff's birthday.
Well, happy Halloween, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm here to brief you on the Intermountain franchise.
Do we want to do the code changes first? Or do you want to go right into the franchise? What was your prefer?
Your item. You do what you want.
Okay, let's start with the franchise.
Okay. Could you put, oh, you did, great. Intermountain Infrastructure Group has asked that we grant them a franchise. It'll be for 15 years over the red areas that you see on that map there. And if you go to the next slide, it's all going to be underground. None of it's going to be above ground, so it'll be in those boxes. So I just wanted to brief the board today to allow them to know. If you want to have a, I don't think I have to.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Any questions for
Fiber optic.
No, it's fiber optic cable.
fiber optic cable? So
How many boxes?
Well, it's quite a few since it's going throughout all of the north area and around.
All right.
yeah. Commissioner Cooney, do you have any questions? Nope. Okay. And so I think it's Deborah. You can continue on.
All right, well then I will lead you guys to your meetings. And happy Halloween, everybody.
Those get stuffed away in there.
Some deep pockets. I like it.
Clown that's packing. This is great.
Yes, I am packed.
That's a different movie.
Yeah.
So, enjoy the Halloween, guys.
Thank you so much.
You will now.
Really
Sugar it up.
With all this candy, you want to see more of us. So, all right, so we're back to you, Kevin.
Matt, you want to pop in on those code changes?
Yes, I will take it away. So, chapter 7.40 Spokane County Code is the ordinance section that deals with the granting of these franchises, like to TDS, which we just did, and to Comcast, which we have, and we're working on a renewal right now. Our ordinance was enacted in the 70s and hasn't really been updated very much since then. So we've been working on some updates in the past several months. And Brian Grogan, who's also on the screen here, is outside counsel on this one. He's a specialist of sorts in this kind of thing, and he's been basically taking the leading oar on this. So I'll turn it over to him for right now.
Thank you. Just an audio check. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
I did not realize yet another shortcoming of Zoom is I can't hand out candy today. So I'm at a big disadvantage, clearly. Matt really teed this up well. Why we're doing this is, as we got a renewal from Comcast, they asked to renew their franchise, and we hadn't renewed their franchise since 1991. And as you probably can guess, lots has changed. have changed in the cable television industry since that time. Then we got a knock on the door from TDS wanting to compete head to head with Comcast and overbuild them. And you just heard you now have another infrastructure proposal for another fiber optic line. So competition is heating up. Our code provision was woefully out of date. So what did we change? We changed things like mapping, construction requirements, indemnification, insurance, customer service, local programming requirements, a host of other provisions. We took away some things as well. We used to have language that said we could regulate the rates for cable television. And as much as we may still want to do that, the federal law prohibits us from doing that. So we brought the code up to compliance with the state of the art for the law as it sits today. The process that we went through was to review this. We worked with an internal team, and then what we did is we sent copies of this in draft form to both Comcast and TDS, since they'd be subject to it. They provided their comments. We incorporated many of their proposed changes, but not all of them. So I would say they are 98% in agreement with this. There's a few things that they would like to see to be more, I guess I would say, a little bit easier on their company from a regulatory standpoint. And the view of the county staff was we can address those issues in their direct cable franchise. So this code, we believe, is in solid position. It is substantially in agreement with both providers. We've been working on it now for some time. We actually introduced a draft of this back at the end of 2021. So we think we are in a position now to recommend this for approval for your consideration.
Okay, any questions for Brian or Matthew? So I've got one question. I know in the past, when we renewed the franchises, we were, as a jurisdiction, whether it was when I was with the city or here at the county, we always tried to get enhancements to our local systems so that county government or city government had the ability to broadcast out to the public information relating to, local government. Is that opportunity still available in the renewal periods for these franchise agreements, or did that go away?
No, that's a really good question. So what we've done in this code provision is we've kind of laid out the general guidelines for what a cable franchise should contain. Earlier this year, the county actually adopted a franchise with TDS. That's a 10-year deal. And in that contract, which is the same thing as saying franchise, it is a contract between the county and TDS. We included local programming requirements so that you would have channel capacity available. It actually includes a fee for additional financial support for the provision of services. So we covered that with TDS. We've now proposed the same exact terms with Comcast. So we're not playing favorites here. Each company is being given the same exact set of requirements. We still are working with Comcast to reach agreement, but we believe we'll have all of those concerns you just raised addressed in those contracts.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments?
And just by way of procedure here, I've given Gina a copy of the proposed changes and a notice of public hearing that will be on your agenda tomorrow. So the board will have the opportunity to sign that notice of public hearing, and then in a couple weeks after that, the public hearing for the code changes will be on the agenda.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that gets us to item 2B, which is Susan Ash with HSSA, and she's not on yet. So how about Melissa Huggins? Is she with us yet? There she is.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me. I do have some slides if it's okay to pull those up. Thank you. Yeah, great. Thank you. So good morning. Thank you, commissioners, for having me. My name is Melissa Huggins. I'm the director of Spokane Arts. We also have Steve McDonald here from the City of Spokane's Economic Development Department. And just wanted to run you through something that we have been working with that we envision could be a partnership between the city and the county. So as you know, we have a pretty wonderful film industry here in Spokane. And the goal as an economic development tool is to convince more productions to film in Spokane County. So there's a few strategies that we have been working on in partnership with various local partners to accomplish that. And I want to welcome Juan Moss, director, producer, film industry expert who has been working with me to develop this proposal, and happy to answer questions at the end. So, couple strategies to convince those productions that they want to film in Spokane County versus filming somewhere else. So we want to be able to sell Spokane County as a film destination. We need to be able to get out there and tell people that Spokane County is a great place to film. We also need to build up the local workforce, and there's some work that can be done to leverage existing resources in the county that hasn't quite been done before. Next slide. And when we're talking about film productions, what we mean is everything from feature films to television series to high-end commercials. So just a little bit of background, most of you are familiar with the TV series Z Nation, and I wanted to show these slides just to give you a sense of what the economic impact of these productions are. So those figures are for one season of Z Nation. The show ran for 5 seasons. There were 69 episodes. That generated an estimated $35 million of direct spend into the Washington state economy and generated $95 million of total economic activity. So as you can see from the graphic there, the jobs on these productions are higher wage jobs. It's an average of $35 an hour with benefits. And then for every production, basically half of the production budget is spent on labor and half of the production budget is spent on local businesses. So again, as you can see from the graphic, that's everything from lodging to transportation to costumes to catering. You know, it's just a huge number of local businesses that get hired and benefit every time we have films that are filming in Spokane County. Next slide. And then I know that graphic is very far away, but just to give you a sense, every little box on that chart is a different job on a film production. So I think, you know, those of us who are lay people, we think of a movie and we think of the director and the writer and the camera person, but there's basically a huge army of people behind the scenes that are making every film possible. So that's everything from, again, costumes, catering, set design, landscaping, you know, just a huge range of people and jobs that make every film production possible. For every episode of Z Nation, again, just to use that example, there were over 100 Washington residents hired for every episode, and there was an average of 80 local cast and crew plus 56 local extras for every single episode. And again, they did almost 70 episodes of that show. Next slide. So just to show the geographic distribution, and again, this is just for Z Nation. This is for one season of Z Nation, so that you can see all of the different filming locations, obviously throughout the county. So there are urban locations, there are rural locations, there are public locations and private ones. So that's everything from, you know, filming in a park, filming at a private home, filming on the street, so on and so on. Next slide. So why are we talking about the film industry right now? Part of it is related to COVID, and I am as tired as anyone of talking about COVID, but the reality is it did shut down the film industry for over a year. And Washington's return to the film industry being back up and running was a lot slower than other states because of our, you know, COVID regulations. But the state legislature passed an increased film incentive that I can talk about a little bit. And that means more business for the state as a whole. And so now is the right time for us as Spokane County to say, okay, Washington State is competitive with our neighbors now in terms of convincing films to come here. So how can Spokane County capture that business? So again, in addition to the direct spend that I talked about, so the hotels, rentals, restaurants, that local spend of those production dollars being spent here also means more sales tax, more lodging tax, other local taxes benefiting from those. And then again, the high wage jobs that I talked about. Next slide. And go ahead and go to the next one. So that budget at the top includes both of these proposals, and mainly we're here to talk about the film liaison. So I'll talk mostly about that. But as I said, we're working on a number of strategies, including a workforce development program that I can talk a little bit about if we have time. Next slide. So what we are hoping to create and what we're hoping to mainly talk about today is a film liaison position that we would like to be potentially shared between Spokane County and the city of Spokane. And this film liaison position would be a full-time person who would be the go-to person for film industry needs in Spokane. They would do everything from provide assistance to productions who do choose to film here in terms of helping those producers get permits and permissions, helping ensure that they follow all the local rules that the city and the county have already set out. Go ahead and go to the next slide there. Thank you. We'd like them, essentially, we would like them to be able to do a whole slew of things. Again, we want them to be a liaison between the productions and the county and the city so that we can ensure permits are issued and also that productions are following those local regulations. We need to have one person at least who can also be that liaison with the general public, so that when there is a commercial or a TV series or a movie filming, that local businesses and individuals have a person to go to who can communicate with them about, okay, this is when this street might be shut down, or this is why this part of the park is roped off for a few hours today. As you can imagine, as you've seen when movies do film here, there's lots of public interest. People get very excited about it and have lots of questions. And right now there is no one person at the city or the county or in any nonprofit who is the go-to person for the film industry. We just don't have that person. So we need that, again, both locally and also to go out and sell Spokane County as a film destination. So essentially, we're hoping to create one full-time position who would have a marketing budget that I can talk about a little bit. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we'd like for this person, this film liaison, in addition to those duties that I just talked about, we'd like them to be able to sell Spokane in the following ways. So, be at some trade shows and talk about the film industry, show off the film industry in Spokane. They would be doing a little bit of advertising, and we'd like them to be able to attend, a couple of select festivals that would be a good fit for selling Spokane. On the left there, I have the note about the state film incentive. So previously, Washington State's film incentive was only $5 million for the entire state. And that was recently increased to $15 million. And that's a rebate that productions apply for from the state film office. So the reason I bring that up is that now we're more competitive with our neighbors. And again, we want to be able to capture that business here in Spokane. Next slide. So I just wanted to cover really quickly, some of the lost opportunities. These are films that considered filming here. And again, we didn't have a film office for them to necessarily liaise with. So they either reached out to, someone that they had worked with before, like One Moss, or some of them were able to get connected with Visit Spokane. So each of those projects, as you can see, $8 million project, $7 million project, again, half of those budgets would be spent locally on labor and half of those budgets would be spent on local businesses and local vendors. And we lost out on those to other cities. Part of the reason that we lost out was because of that lower state incentive. But now that we have a higher state incentive, we feel like we're in a better spot to be able to capture those. And again, we want to be proactive about that from the local perspective. Next slide. Go ahead and I'll just say quickly, our second strategy, as I mentioned at the top, is to create some workforce development. So right now we have a gap in the pipeline, and eventually we'd like to create this pre-apprenticeship program that would connect local students, high school and college, to local production houses where they could do a pre-apprenticeship. They would get paid an hourly wage, they'd get on-the-job experience, and really build up their local network and build up the local pipeline of workers. Next slide. So essentially what our primary ask, as I said, is that film liaison position. And the cost of that position, again, we'd like to split between Spokane County and the city of Spokane. There is a model in place for this. So the Spokane County Historic Preservation Officer right now is a shared position between the city and the county. And so we we've had discussions with the city of Spokane about whether they would be open to that kind of partnership, and their leadership absolutely is open to the idea. Essentially, the cost that we're talking about, we're proposing a 3-year pilot program, and the cost for the film liaison position and their marketing budget would essentially be about $200,000 a year total. So we would be asking the county for $100,000 per year over 3 years. So essentially $300,000 total for a 3-year pilot program to create that full-time film liaison position. Does that make sense? So I know that's a lot of information that I have thrown at you. Do you want to go back a couple of slides, Ron, to one of the film liaison duties? Maybe keep going back. There we go. So I would love to open it up for questions and open it up to Juan Moss and Steve McDonald if they want to capture anything that I missed.
I mean, I'll just say a few words. Steve McDonald with the City of Spokane Community and Economic Development. So many years ago, in the early 2000s, I was the president of an organization called Film LA. It was a really unique entity that was basically a 501c6 economic development agency, but private, apart from the city and the county, but it was formed by the city and the county. Worked really well in coordinating the amount of filming that goes on there is definitely necessary, but the way it worked before the organization was there is if you were a filmmaker, you had to go to different desks in the city, you had to go to Public Works and Fire and Police, you had to go to the county. And what this did was that it consolidated it all in one location, making it easy for the filmmakers to choose a destination and get through all that work. Here, it has kind of a twofold initiative, which is also doing the promotion and marketing to get the filming here. That's not an issue that LA had to deal with, but all of our issues were about making it easy for the filmmakers that were there, television, commercial production, to film in LA. So there is a model out there. I mean, and just to give you a sense of scale, in LA, it's basically a private company of 100 people is Film LA. But here, to start off with one person makes all the sense in the world for how much this can grow. And the actual film liaison position or office could be self-sustainable in a very little time. There's some unique things that we did at Film LA where you're charging people to advertise their location or their catering service right on the database that they would inquire about filming activity. So there are a lot of models out there to do that, but I'm happy and been working with Melissa and Juan, and very supportive of it and very supportive of it being out of the city or county government for flexibility and cost and a number of other issues. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Juan Moss. I'm a freelance producer director here in town. I'm here mostly representing the Spokane Film Project, which got together the Spokane Arts about pitching this idea. Having worked in LA and a lot of parts of the country, I think the biggest component that I saw once we got our incentive money up to a compatible position is not having something out selling our community. One of the things that a lot of the locals producers we do, but our arms only reach so far by who we know, and I think there's opportunities for us to get some more production up here. And I will be honest, like our sweet spot to get productions up here, if you saw those numbers, a lot of that 5 to 7 million, that's like the perfect sweet spot for our community size right now to land. And we could be tapping into it, and particularly because of the wonderful landscapes and terrain that we have that is so different within 20 minutes of a drive, 30 minutes of a drive, which becomes a huge selling point. But people don't know that. People don't only know, most of Hollywood, when you talk to them, they know, oh, that's close to Coeur d'Alene, isn't it? And I'm having to explain to them how much more they have here.
Okay, so I will share with my fellow board members that 2 weeks ago, Jerry Gimmel and I had a meeting with a group of investors that are looking to build a soundstage operation out in the West Plains. It looks like 4 to 5 sound stages in probably 1 to 2 buildings and stuff. So, it's interesting that we're getting this interest in the area at this point and stuff. I had not talked to Steve or anybody else about this prior to this morning. So just kind of an interesting confluence of activities and stuff. So any questions from Josh or Mary?
I guess a question I would have, what permits would anyone need to film in unincorporated county?
Well-
For me? Maybe, it might be, or public, I mean, I assume if you wanna shut down a street, you would get permission, but outside of that, would we have any, in unincorporated county, I'm not talking, I don't know what the city has, but in unincorporated county, other than shutting down a street, which you would do through Public Works, I don't know what other restrictions we have in place that you'd need to get a permit for anything.
I am not 100% sure. One might know a little better. I mean, I think part of it is planning is 2 things. So sort of both planning for that eventuality, that there will be an increased need for that because now we've tripled the size of the incentive and ideally there will be more productions. And then I think also the notification piece, being able to plan for having a process in place, and I think having a person who can build that process for you. And then secondly, what Steve said in terms of the position becoming self-sustaining is, there could be a small amount of revenue generation from saying, okay, here's the process. You apply for a $25 permit and that allows you to do X, Y, or Z. And then they don't have to, as Steve was saying, go around to 17 different departments individually and say, do you have a process? 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 So even though that infrastructure, like you say, may not exist right now, I think it may be helpful for the county to have that in place because you will be getting more questions about it, would be my guess. Did you say that's fair, Juan?
Yeah, and on top of it, it's also and particularly in Z Nation, we rent a lot of Spokane County property. So we had to deal with the infrastructure, figuring out who to go to rent that property, and I mean owned by the county. Buildings and stuff. So there's a combination of that. So yes, you don't have a lot of these processes right now established, but I feel like the need of that individual being in the loop sooner than later to when these steps start getting implemented if needed, but also the second part is also the sales component.
Yeah, the more successful you are at getting filming, the more need you'll find out for things like pre-notification and obstructions of sidewalks and streets. And as that happens more and more, people kind of demand that, hey, we need to know about this in advance. Is there a way to get notified? Is there a process? For the soundstage that Al was talking about, those would generally never require permitting because they're purpose built for that. But in other areas, there's a number of things that can be done that can help the production company and help reduce the numbers of complaints that you get from people.
Ashley, you had a comment?
Yeah, I actually had a question. So I'm working HR, and so my brain always goes to staffing. So when I hear the ask for the city to pay for a portion of the salary and the county, my question is, who actually oversees this position? So when we think about things like payroll, W-2, benefits, tax reporting, workers' comp, do you guys have a plan in place as to where this position resides, so to speak? Or would you be asking for us to have one of us host that person?
Yeah, so what we're proposing is that the position would be housed within Spokane Arts. And Visit Spokane has committed to offering office space and IT support. Spokane Arts is essentially housed within Visit Spokane. So they would offer the same office space and IT support that they offer Spokane Arts. And then all of those pieces that you just talked about would be handled by Spokane Arts. There's also a lot of great processes in partnership in terms of the contracts that we have with the city of Spokane. So for example, we make quarterly reports to the city of Spokane. We have a representative from the city who sits on the Spokane Arts Governing Board as fiduciary authority. And so, certainly we could create a similar arrangement with the county so that, a county commissioner serves on the board as fiduciary oversight, and, we make regular reports and that sort of thing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Cooney, did you have a question?
I guess this is just the first time I'm hearing about it, so I don't know what the expectation is for making a decision today or not, but I think there's a lot to investigate and figure out where the funding would come from to pay for that position.
Yeah, I think this is the first time for all of us, quite frankly. So we're all in the front of the learning curve. So any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. We will pursue this with great vigor and figure out where we want to end up at.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Okay. So bouncing back, do we have Susan Ash on the line with us now? Okay, Susan, you're up. You're still on mute.
I'm sorry. It's very nice to see all of you. I was asked today to come forward and speak to you about ordinance that was created under Resolution 080569 a long time ago when HSSA was first created in 07 and then actually operating in January of 09. And all this is about the fact that HSSA, after having discussed this with the commissioners, went to the state in 2019 and was authorized for another 15 years. And that begins next year in 2023 and will last till 2038. As you know, HSSA receives 0.02% of sales and use tax that otherwise would have gone to the state. So it's not a tax on the county per se, new tax. Our Constitution has limited ability to invest in economic development. And this was one way that was created by the state that came through an idea from Spokane leadership to consider, and it was passed, and we have been, as I mentioned, reauthorized. So it simply continues that sales tax deference or deduction that would have gone to the state anyway for the next 15 years of our authorization. I thought I'd throw in a couple of things here just to put it in perspective. HSSA invests in research in the health and life sciences to increase and grow that industry here, which certainly makes sense given the two major medical schools called the pharmacy, now 4 nursing colleges, and two big healthcare systems. And we've made great progress. To date, we've spent about $14 million in research by both private and academic institutions, and supported through funding over $50 million in external funds coming into Spokane. Those would be grants that we match that are coming from the federal government and SBIR, STTR types of grants and those sorts of things. They're new dollars into our local economy, in other words, so about $50 million there. And over $100 million in economic activity altogether. So I think that we're doing exactly what it was intended for HSSA to do and doing it well. We were able in 2010, because the commissioners agreed to it, attach ourselves to a larger bond issue at a very favorable rate that the county enjoyed. And happy to report that we repaid that bond 2 years early. And we've been audited by the state several times as well, and we've never had a finding. So very proud of our record. And I'm here today to ask that you approve the extension of the sales tax credit at 0.02% through the next duration of our authorization. I also just personally want to let you know that you probably already know that I'm retiring, and I've been with HSSA since its conception. And I want to thank the county, and I really want to thank the commissioners, but I also want to thank the staff and employees who have been so helpful to us over the years. The folks in the Treasurer's Department have been terrific. JJ Hernandez and Deborah and Amy and Jody and that group are who really I work with on a day to day or week to week or month to month basis. Super people. Everybody we've come in contact with at the county is great and supported HSA extremely well. I want again just thank you and hope that you will consider this, and happy to answer any questions.
So Susan, what is the timing on this in terms of us being able to take an action?
Anytime, but the sooner the better. It's in effect, and it will become in effect January 1.
Okay, so anytime before January 1.
Correct.
So we can tee this up. Go ahead.
And you need 10 days notice, so you're gonna need to build in some notice.
Okay.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Good point.
All right, so we will get it in the queue.
Thank you.
And any other questions for Susan then? All right, very good.
Thank you so
Susan.
much. Later today, we'll be voting on a new executive director, and you'll be probably the first folks to know. Thank you.
Very good. Yes,
Mark's
Scott.
team has been working on developing a notice of public hearing. So in preparation for the BOCC saying yes, move it ahead, we can get that on the agenda probably as early as next week.
Okay.
Thank you. Perfect. Appreciate your support.
Moving forward. Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
And then next up in the batting box is Mr. Jeff McMorris.
Arian's gonna start us off.
Good morning, Commissioners. This morning we met and scored an ARP proposal for strong and healthy neighborhood community features that closed this last week. Jeff McMorris, Dale Anderson from Legal, Kyle Tuick from Public Works, and myself for the scoring committee. We'd like to do our first touch with you on that, and if there is approval, we will proceed for award tomorrow. The firms that we would like to present to you that scored highly in our natural grade points are two proposals put in by Spokane County Parks. One has to do with new green spaces in the West Plains area that, in addition to the public access, will actually bring them into better compliance with growth management requirements in that area, in the unincorporated area. Spokane County Parks submission for the Plants Ferry expansion to take that into a higher tier use in a sports complex, more similar to what we have right now at Dwight L. Merkel. That particular award will be in conjunction with a joint use with the City of Spokane Valley for ongoing shared maintenance and operation. Our third recommendation for your consideration is for, again, another joint use with the hub to expand their services to outdoor fields and play spaces that will be public access when it isn't rented for club or private use. And again, that will have a joint use agreement with Spokane County as part of the award. And the last one is a green space and play space request by Family of Promise. It's for a small amount in their Mission Shelter area, where they were granted some changes by the city of Spokane with right-of-way and parking augmentation to create an open play area, not only for the shelter residents, but for the neighborhood to come and play at. And that neighborhood fits squarely within the US Treasury vulnerable populations and disproportionately impacted populations. If those 4 firms and proposals are fully awarded, we will be about 133,000 above the 12 million that you allocated to this eligible category. The committee wanted your thoughts on whether to proceed with that or to come back and do a revised recommendation to stay within the full 12 million. Jeff, any other?
So the West Plains Park is, everything's in up to $6 million.
Correct.
The Plans Ferry is 5 million.
Correct.
The hub for the ball fields is 990,000. And Family Promise is 143 and change.
Correct.
So it'd be going over about 1%. And then, so we could either, you're at 11,990,000 with the top 3. So you could either give 10,000 to Family Promise and just cap it at that, or tack on the extra 133,000 to fully fund their request of that project. That's just a decision point for the commissioners.
Okay, thoughts, Josh?
I think Family Promise seems like a good thing. I'd say go over the 130,000 bucks.
I would agree.
So we can.
Mary, your thoughts?
Sorry, yes, I think I would agree just to go ahead and go over and take care of the issues.
Okay. So we'll draft that for those 4 and change the dollar amount to the category appropriately.
And you'll see that on your consent agenda tomorrow.
Very good. Okay.
We had another RFP close on Friday as well. We did not receive really the number of responses that we expected. It was for our first multi-category RFP. It was for water and sewer other, ranging from eligible category 5.1 all the way through 5.18. And not only did we not receive a large number of responses, we didn't really receive enough to fund what you had allocated. So we'd like to ask your consideration for us to put notice out to the community that we're extending the period for an additional week, just in the event that there just wasn't the level of awareness in case there are some more interested projects to come in.
Okay.
The other option is we just keep it, and then you would have either a reserve within that direction of funding that you could utilize later or move somewhere else at the board's discretion.
Thoughts?
I'm fine with keeping it open another week.
Okay. Mary, are you okay keeping it open for another week, or? She's tied up. I'm okay extending it for another week.
So we'll just repost that then.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, she's back.
Yes, sorry. Yes, I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
So let's keep it open for another week and see if we can get any more takers.
We have a couple more things to go over with you.
Yes, we do. So we did score and review the responses for the community violence intervention category. And this one, we are actually doing something a little different. We're seeking some input on this from you for our first two awardees. One is in the domestic violence arena that fits very squarely within the category, but Jeff and Heather are going to be talking about the additional opportunity for consideration of other braided funding that we feel is kind of a holistic package on this. We don't normally have that opportunity when we're making an ARP award, but feel that that would give you the most holistic viewpoint. The second respondent that we would like your review and consideration on was a proposal received by the Spokane County Commissioners. What I'll be sending around.
Sheriff's Office.
Oh my gosh. Yes, the Sheriff's Office. Thank you, Jeff. Did so good on a Monday morning until then. This is an executive summary that we'll be going over with you today for direction, along with the full response. The Spokane County Sheriff's Office is the only entity that oversees, as we know, the entire geographical boundaries of Spokane County, and has a number of different roles of which they work with other law enforcement agencies and emergency communications. This particular project is to institute something called a real-time crime center, which has been on the radar for the Sheriff's Office for about 7 years. It was just starting to come into the scene when the county replaced their CAT RMS, that is now the New World software, and it wasn't a part of our package at that time, but the Sheriff's Office has been studying the communities that have implemented this type of intelligence-based additional information. And as a result of that, they've looked at those communities and how they have been impacted in positive officer response, crime reduction, and financial savings, and felt the time was right to begin a pilot or a Spokane version of a real-time crime center. Their request on this category was 1.9 up to $4 million. And what we wanted to show you is what the pilot would be encompassing from a budgetary standpoint and an impact standpoint, knowing that ARP funds do have the 2026 use deadline. The pie chart shows roughly by percentages how this project would be implemented, with the largest component going towards support staff for the project, pilot, programming, technical, and implementation staff. We've had the opportunity to review this in a deeper dive, not only with the selection committee, but also with Mike Sparber, the Senior Director over Justice, and Ashley over HR, as well as Under Sheriff Knowles and the Lieutenant over this. We have a number of different ways where the onboarding for the project management, the technology, and the operators of the real-time crime center could be a part of this pilot, ranging from contracted services that would include the necessary CJIS, which is the background check requirements, to the county consideration of temporary or short-term full-time employees. Any of those situations, though, would have the constraints that they are pilot staff positions that would not be guaranteed funding past 2026 and would be a requirement of the project itself to come up with ongoing sustainable funding. We also agreed that the pilot project governance would need to include a senior leadership member, and Mike Sparber had the interest, the expertise, and the availability to come alongside the Sheriff's Office, not only for this pilot as how it would impact the Sheriff's Office, but also there's going to be a lot of potential positive impacts for other county departments, including detention services, the defenders, the prosecutors, various courts, and the SHREC, our emergency communications intersect. So we wanted you to be aware that although this is a large investment, it would vet the ability for, on the ground, a call coming in, officers to have the awareness and the actual documented proof to allow them to engage. Commissioner French gave an example, I think last week or the week before, that oftentimes a crime in progress is done, even though both the victim and the potential offender are still on scene, and with recent legislation, an officer can't engage. With the Real-Time Crime Center, we will have additional opportunities to have video feeds, additional surveillance, license plate readers that would give the officer the legal ability to stay on the scene and interact with both victim and offender as part of this, without an additional add to uniform employees. So those are some of the examples that we have seen in the mentor sites. The most prominent of those being West Palm Beach Police Department, that is going to mentor us and provide the baselines in the outcome metrics that the police department will be using to show the viability of this project. Those include decreases in homicides, robberies, gunshot injuries, and overall violent crime as a basis of this intelligence-led component in not only the emergency responder, but also the on-scene abilities for law enforcement. So that is really what this proposal goes into detail, but we wanted you to have kind of a overarching view of what this means as it goes forwards, and any questions as far as the budget requests and some ideas that we have been kind of noodling around for after 2026, if you'd like to go into that. Jeff, anything else?
That's a good, the main thing is it would require staff, and it'd be very clear when they're hired, that they're hired with a pot of funds that expire at the end of 26. And sometime between now and December of 26, I'm sure there would be presentations here about the positive outcomes of this, and there'd be a decision point whether you wanted to continue it or not, and there would be a funding gap.
They have talked about the concept of a law enforcement usage fee. For those of you that were around for the mental health facility, we did something like that called a municipality fee. We fortunately never had to use it, but if other agencies beyond the sheriff's department wanted to utilize this technology in order to do that, they would pay an onboarding fee. Again, that's one of those things that as the pilot shows viability is an ongoing new revenue source above and beyond grants, formulaic funding, and other things as we get close to 2026.
And the gap is at about 200,000 based on their budget. I would say, you know, we tend to overestimate income and underestimate outflow. So I would expect it to be between $250,000 and $500,000 on an annualized basis going forward. The committee thinks it's a great project, but because this is one of the first times, if not the first time, we'd be bringing something forward that there could be out-year financial commitment to, although not technically within the program. We all know there'd be people coming back to this table asking for funds. That's why we're bringing it to this at a little higher level of visibility for decision making.
Okay, thoughts? Josh?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a good program. I mean, I think what Jeff pointed out is key, that these individuals know this is essentially same as a grant funded position, that there is an end date unless, of course, we can prove that it was successful and we can find additional funding, but there's no guarantee of that. And I think that needs to be made 100% clear up front.
Mary?
Figure out how to unmute. I think I agree. I mean, I think this is something it's worth using these dollars to see what the pilot project is and see how we can move forward and see if there is a sustainable future for it. Because if it's successful, it should be helpful, and I think other entities would want to be using, like Arian said, kind of come in with revenue to participate in this.
Thank you. So I will echo my fellow commissioners' comments, but also, with the legislature, changing the way that we do law enforcement, if we don't adjust, then we are putting our citizens at risk. And if this will enhance our ability to respond to, criminal activity, then I think it's worthwhile to invest in the pilot. I think, Josh and Mary both make great comments with regard to it's a pilot, and unless we can find other revenues to be able to sustain it, it might have a lifespan of, maybe 3 years. And so we got 3 years to find out where we can get additional revenue for the program, if in fact it generates the kind of outcomes we're hoping that it will. So, you got 3 nods to move forward. Scott?
Just a couple questions for clarity for the commissioners. In the funding that's being recommended, it includes capital, infrastructure, equipment stuff for the real-time crime center, and a component for operations, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then in that, there's an assumption of some revenue coming in for participating jurisdictions, although you've taken and kind of reduced that revenue estimate down a little bit, right?
Yes.
So with that built in, there's belief there's enough funding to the end of ARP 2026.
And based on their budget, there's actually a fund balance at the end of 26 that would continue them forward a couple of years.
Okay.
If all the estimates prove accurate.
Right. And then just back of the envelope, if none of the revenue materializes, is it look like this still will have enough funding to get to the end of 26, or might it have to end early?
If none of the other placeholders materialize, what will be impacted is the fund balance. So, it could come in at a net zero at 2026.
Okay.
Law enforcement user fee is just one of the place marked. Some other things that will need to be vetted through the governance group and the Board of Commissioners is how much does this intersect some of our other emergency response functions? Is there a potential alignment and maybe offloading of some of this load from our Shrek staff that this can take? What does that mean, financially? So I think there's a lot of things we just haven't figured out yet that could be potential funding sources, but at the very least, what it would do is erode the fund balance.
There should be enough money, just shy of 4 million of fully funded 3,997. Worst case, might end in October instead of December if it ran short, but I believe the 4 million would essentially fully fund it through the end of 26, and the additional revenues that they believe would be coming in would be building up for the roll forward.
Thank you.
One little side note is the city of Spokane Valley has committed about $850,000 towards that. I think they're wanting to see the viability of that is, and depending on how that serves their community, that's another partner that's kind of above and beyond some of those other potential funding sources that they may or may not decide this is worth additional investment.
So then, that answer everything.
Yep, thank you.
So hearing, it sounds like we're gonna fully fund this at 3.997. The other category or the other applicant that moved forward in this category was the YWCA and their work with victims of domestic violence. Their ask is just over 2 million. So between these two program applications, you have 6 million in requests for 5 million in allocated budget. And Heather's here. We're gonna go over some other options that would be on the table for funding. And if you received an earlier version of this, Heather gave me some new numbers. That's why I left the room a half hour ago, to update. So your emergency rental assistance 2, you'll recall you have TRAP, ERAP, and ERA2, these 3 federal pots of money for rental assistance. The ERA2 category, they have recently given counties the option to use the funds differently than originally programmed. So you'll see at the very top, we have received just over 5 million in ERA2. SNAP has 2.869 that's been awarded to them, and they were just over 2 spent in this category. Is that correct, Heather?
803,000.
Oh, just 803 spent. So they still have 1.3 million there. If you look down at the bottom in gray, you'll see there's also 3.5 million in TRAP and 6.8 million in ERAP. So we have $11-ish million still in rental assistance. The remaining ERA two, to go back to the top and talk about the section in green, there's $2,152,639 that we're talking about here that can be used. You have the flexibility to use it differently than just rental assistance. Now it's broken into three categories. We have to get to 75% allocated, not spent, just allocated, to be able to get to category 3. We can do the 10% of the total, which is category 2 now, but we have to fully allocate that first, I guess it'd be the 65%. If you take that 395 would take us to 65%. Category 2 would take us to 75%, which frees up the last 25%. Each category has different rules and allowances. The feds outdid themselves on this one. So in category 1, we can do the continued rental assistance that we've been doing. You guys, the board, could choose to allocate this 395 to SNAP, and that would just increase their pot. That pot is also eligible for relocation, security, deposits, other issues that fall under part of the WISE application if you wanted to choose to target this 395,000 to survivors in domestic violence situations. If you don't award it to SNAP, you have to do an RFP. You were able to directly allocate to SNAP because of emergency resolutions, and you could choose to add to that allocation under the emergency. If you do anything else, it has to be an RFP. However, in your RFP, you could narrow it down and say we'd like a scoring preference for a target population, such as DV survivors and their dependents. So you can't just say why we're awarding this to you, but you could say we are dedicating this to that subject matter. The Y could apply for it, as could any other group that works with that population. If you choose to go through an RFP, talking with Heather in the grants office, it would be awarded through the same ARP portal because this is ARP money. What we call ARP is actually SLRF, State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. So under the broader ARP umbrella, this is ARP money coming to a different federal category. So we would award it the same way we're doing our regular yellow sheet ARP stuff. In addition to the 395, category 2, this 10%, would offer additional flexibility if you chose to use these funds for DV services. It brings in your legal services, attorney fees, navigators to help find housing, so more of the social services, wraparound services that would go with it. If you choose to do an RFP, you can award category 1 and category 2 as 2 separate RFPs or 1 joint RFP. If it was 1 joint RFP, it would read, of this, 395,000 has these rules and 502 has these rules. That would provide just shy of $900,000 that could backfill. So you have $1,003,000 left in your ARP pot for community violence interventions if we subtract out what we just talked about with the sheriff's office. So one choice would be, we still have fund balance. You could say if we want to fully fund the Y, we can increase that 5 million to whatever amount you choose. Another would be, if you like the idea of allocating this almost 900,000 to DV services through another RFP, which the Y I think would certainly compete, but it'd have to be an open process. That would get them 95% fully funded for the subject matter, for the work to be done. So before I talk about category 3, which is kind of a separate issue, I think I'll pause here. Heather, anything I've missed?
Got it.
I apologize, your heads are probably spinning from numbers and acronyms. But any feedback or initial thoughts?
Josh? think Mary is in transit. I don't know whether she's still.
I just saw her, she's here.
Is she here now? Okay. While we're waiting for her to join us, and we're going to have to free up a chair at the table. You know, if it's possible, I guess I would weigh in and say it would be nice to be able to fully fund the WISE efforts with regard to domestic violence. But I'm just one voice, so I'm not even a very loud voice. So
Commissioner, on that, if you choose to go ahead with a new RFP that we could cycle through our
Right.
ARP format, we can do what's called a call out to a particular population. So that's very common in the community services world. So we're not
Okay.
doing a firm, but we're saying that there's a directed priority to survivors of domestic violence and their families. The awards to date have been for the general public, and there's a lot there. So that would be a way to accommodate that interest.
My question would be, when you're saying fully funded, you're talking from ARP or through a RFP of this flexible pot?
yes. So
Welcome to our world.
yeah. So all I articulated was my end goal. I don't care how you get there.
Okay.
So you guys are experts in doing the manipulation. I just want to see the outcome is what I was motivated to respond to. And I'll turn the floor back over to the chair.
Well, I'll probably let you keep running the meeting just because I'm gonna be waiting for a call, but.
Okay.
But I think, yeah, that's my end goal too, is that, you know, they came in through the process, it scored well. But as we've done with others, when we've seen additional funding sources that we could use, we've tried to use those. I just don't want to delay too much. I mean, I guess that's the only problem with having to go back out for an RFP.
You would only be delaying roughly half of their ask. We could award the $1,003,000 next week. So you could partially award just over $1 million through ARP at the same time that we open an RFP for another roughly 900,000, which I would expect the Y to score very well in, because they've already scored well in one. It wouldn't be any extra work for the Y unless they chose to. They could go into the application system and simply move everything over and say, this is our application. If they wanted to make any changes to their application, that they could choose to do that and do a new application, but it would be as simple as changing a checkbox for them and anyone else who already applied in this world of DV services. And then anybody else who didn't apply would have the ability. So it would give a month delay with a 3-week RFP, a week to score. By time board action, maybe a 5-week delay on 900,000, but they would have the first $1 million next week if that's your choice.
Thanks for the clarification on that. And then is SNAP, I mean, they know that this, I mean, because we awarded it all to SNAP, correct?
They actually haven't ever received this part. So this is the part of the funds that have not been awarded yet. They're at the county, but not awarded to anyone.
Thank you.
So there'd be, and I have had a conversation with them on a different matter last week, but did mention this flexibility. And so they are aware of these options and opportunities before the board.
And you have spoken with the Y, and they are aware of this braided kind of scenario, and I think they were amenable, knowing half would come from Treasury slurp and then looking at this other one, so I don't think this would catch them off guard.
My memory, and you guys can correct me if I'm not remembering this right, but it seems to me that the holiday season is the highest level of domestic violence that we experienced during the year cycle. And if that's the case, then getting that 1.3 to them in anticipation of the holidays and stuff, I think would fit into, I think, our goal in trying to provide resources to be able to help folks that are finding themselves in that situation during a difficult time of the year and stuff. So I like the idea of braiding the two of them together.
And their request, just over 2 million, is through the end of 26. So that this is a multi-year request, so that,
Okay.
that million would certainly
Get a lot of
cover the
traction.
needs until a subsequent decision.
Okay,
And this is a match, so they have raised an additional 9 million towards their overall goal, so we're helping them with gap funding, so that is nice that, there are things that they can chunk through during the calendar. Sorry, Scott.
Scott?
So just to recap for the commissioners on the rental assistance that's still remaining at the bottom here, SNAP still has between TRAP, ERAP, and ERA, all the alphabet soups, they have over $12 million still to continue to put into the community. And I believe the last number we saw, they've already put out $36 million to the community since these programs have been in place. So there is still dollars remaining to continue to meet those needs.
And we've already contracted with SNAP to put those dollars out.
Correct.
Which is separate from this. Okay.
So based on what I'm hearing, we will next week on consent fully fund the sheriff ask at $3,997,000, partially fund the Y at $1,003,000 to move that $5 million into the community. And then as soon as we can this week, we will get the RFP going for this almost 900,000 between categories 1 and 2 to put another 900,000 into DV services in the near future. Does that capture correctly?
I think you got it.
I think so.
So then, next decision point.
Well, before you leave that, since there was some news stories about the rental assistance program and everything like that, and I'm not sure that the news stories captured the flavor of what was trying to communicate because of the federal standards that, are playing musical chairs with these fundings and stuff. I just want to put on the record that I think SNAP is doing a heck of a job. I mean, they are getting the money out there. I can tell you that my partner and I have got a request in for assistance for one of our renters, January, and we still have not been able to progress on that request and stuff. So 11 months. And I know that the timetable that SNAP does is significantly less than that. So just kudos to them for, getting that money back out in the community and helping the people that are desperately in need of that help. I mean, they're doing a yeoman's job as far as I can tell. And my personal experience is, I wish my rental property was in the county and stuff. So anyway, for
Well,
the
just
record,
Commissioner, your renter's request was not through SNAP, correct?
Through the city's process.
no, it's through the city process. Yeah. Jared?
On that topic, I just wanted to say two things. One, Heather did a great job last week of explaining a very complicated subject about this $1 million clawback.
Yeah.
And on that note, out of the 5 pieces of coverage that we got, one of them not being super favorable, the other ones turned out from what was a potentially bad story to telling the great story of how much money we have left.
Yeah.
In fact, the KHQ story, I want to use it as marketing to talk about the fact that we have money available for those in need in the community.
Yeah.
But it started as you guys lost $1 million of our money, and we actually turned that around to say the real story, and it's very beneficial. So that's my plan this week, is to actually publicize the KHQ story.
Good.
But some of it was much better than others.
Some of
And
it.
one piece in particular seemed to have an agenda with what they were writing, so.
I'm shocked.
If you look at the dates on here, so down at the bottom in gray, you'll see ERAP 2.0 expires the end of June of 23. TRAP 2.0 and expires the end of September 23. ERA, which is where they took the $1 million back from, doesn't expire for another 2 full years, the end of September of 25. So we were working with SNAP, thinking let's spend down the pots that expire first. And then the feds came in and said, well, if you haven't spent 20% of your ERA 2 by this certain date, we're gonna take some, and they actually didn't take any money back. We were expected to be awarded some additional funds, which we will no longer receive. But to me, everybody was behaving kind of what's normal, first in, first out, first to expire, use first. And then the feds did a little bit of a game changer. They threw the dates out last minute, and that's why we are where we are on that piece.
And none of those clawback dollars reflected funds the county had received, nor funds that were awarded to SNAP. So SNAP does not get impacted by this. This was non-allocated, it was allocated but not sent to the county yet. So there was no impact on monies that the county has received.
And is it my understanding that lots of other communities had this happen?
Oh, across the county, wasn't it 300 million?
300 million
Across the
state.
nation. That
And nobody
was,
was granted an exception. So.
and Heather wrote a great appeal on behalf of the community, but it was denied along with every other appeal in the country.
It just seemed like kind of a federal clawback.
Well, and it was unannounced and a surprise, so they changed the rules a little bit midstream. They can do that sort of thing, but that's when you set the rules at the start of the program and you understand what you have to follow for guidance, then you put that into place. And then at the last minute, they pull a switcheroo.
And as of the end of September, I updated the numbers. We've actually expended 40 million, a little over $40.5 million in rental assistance. So it's even higher than originally we reported at the end of August. So we're over 70% of what's actually in the hands of people that needed the assistance.
Great job.
So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, next item is broadband.
No, there's one more ARP, sorry.
Oh,
We're using all our time today. So this third category of the flexible funds through ERA two, the 1.255 million in the darkest green, that is a category, 25% of this award, that the commissioners can either keep spending as emergency rental assistance, or that can be put into affordable housing, a capital funding gap to a project. The only caveat of significance is the project has to be planned to house people less than 50% AMI. So that's the very low, there's low income, very low, and extremely low income. Through HUD, this is the very low 50% one. It would have to go through a separate RFP. You can't combine it with the upper two, which you've decided to put out. Just the way, by chance, you'll recall last week, you passed 6.3 million in housing projects. The highest ranked project that was below the funding level is Pine Villa, which happens to be a SNAP rehab property. It serves people at 30 to 50% AMI. So we'd have to put out an RFP, just like we will with the DV services. But we know we already have a high ranking project that, again, all they'd have to do is go into the system and make one checkbox change. They can move their application forward. So it's very low, 10 minutes to work on their behalf, and that includes my phone call to them. That could receive 1.2 million. Of course, it'd be an open RFP, another project, as long as it meets the 50% AMI. So last decision point around ARP today is category 3, 25% of the ERA pot. Would you like an RFP to go out to do some more affordable housing capital, or keep it in with the $12 million of rental assistance?
I mean, I would prefer to do an RFP and get it out there for affordable housing units. So one question is are there other projects, because 50% is kind of a hard one, right? Is it?
Quite a few of the affordable housing projects do meet that. And the funders are very used to that through the HUD world. So that they will apply if they have one that fits. The one thing I would say to lobby in favor of putting out the RFP, if we get this money allocated on the street, the feds can't claw it back. If they decide to do more clawbacks, to me, it'd be nice to get this one out there so it's outside that realm. To be fair, we don't expect them to do any clawbacks on funding that's already at the county. but they changed their mind on some things in CARES, they've changed their mind before, they could change their mind again.
But I think with what we've seen, if already getting $40 million out in rent assistance, I think we know affordable housing is a crisis. And so in low-income housing, so to me, this would be a perfect way to get it back into that pot.
And we had 7 other applicants in the same situation that Jeff described of one of those that we would also reach out and say you were funded through this ARP, you would be eligible. So I think there's a lot of interest out there for that affordable housing genre.
So I was made aware of a situation last Friday, but Jim Frank, with regard to the Highline project that we got out at Airway Heights. You know, Habitat and Community Frameworks are finishing up those low-income housing to be able to move folks from the trailer parks into the housing. But what they've discovered is that there is no funding to actually pay for them to move out of the trailer into the housing. You know, some of them were assuming that they could sell the trailer and with the money they made off of that, it would pay for their housing. Well, no one's buying the trailers and they've got little value and stuff. And so he was making the request of me to come back to you and say, do we go back to the legislature and see if they would provide funding to pay for that transition? You know, the housing is there. They've got the housing. We just don't have the money to pay to move them into the housing. Or would this be money that maybe that would, you know, it's a, you know, you're talking about $3,000 to $5,000 per household to be able to move them. Would setting up a fund to be able to accommodate that out of this money, is that maybe a good use of this money or not? I'm raising an issue. I'm not campaigning for a solution. I'm just raising it to say, you know, we either get it from here or we get it from the legislature.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure that you could use this funding for that.
I don't know.
Category 1 you can. But if you look, yeah, category 1.
Category 1 and 2.
Also includes relocation, security deposits.
Yeah.
So that would be, so we talked about having the category just for preference to DV survivors and their dependents. You could have a second preference around people moving out of dangerous zones such as potential APZs. So you could put that.
But then we already have the funds from
We
the
have-
state.
Not the funds don't cover the cost of moving.
They don't.
They cover the cost of the housing, and we've got that, and the house, they're now finishing up the housing so people can move in, but we don't have the money to pay for actually moving them over. And so that's what they're looking for, and came up and Jim called and said, hey, how do we actually move them over and stuff, and so, like I say, I'm not campaigning, I just, you know, this just came up to me, I wasn't aware of it before, and so I don't know how we, you know, he's saying, God, we got the housing and now we can't move the guys in, you know.
So what, does he mean actually like?
Yeah, physically moving their furniture
Paying
and
for
everything.
Okay.
Yeah, paying for moving them over.
Or is he talking security deposits, down pay, like those type of, or just?
Just physically moving the stuff
Relocation.
over.
So relocation is allowed under category 1 and 2. If that was added to the target parameters, it would also reduce what's available for DV. But a way to solve for that would be you could add $200,000 to the 5 million and award additional ARP money now to DV. If you plan on, say in RP, we're setting aside some for relocation assistance and the remainder for DV survivors.
And I guess the question is how many people from the trailer parks is that really, because it's not a lot of units out there.
Yeah, you know, I don't, Jim didn't give me an exact number, so let me get a hold of him and find out.
39 units are available there, so they're not moving more than 39 families.
39.
And you gotta assume some of those people are just loading their stuff up in a truck and driving it over. I mean, that's what I did last time. We didn't even rent a U-Haul. It was my pickup. I mean, because it wasn't far. It was like a mile away.
Yeah, I can't imagine, you're not talking about a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for these folks, it's a lot of money because, I mean, they're not paying for anything right now.
And they don't have a lot of stuff.
And they don't have a lot of stuff. No,
So like, so just throwing things out, like you could award the Y 1.1 million. you'd be going 97,000 over that category allocation, go from 5 million to 5,097,000. That would then, if you're looking at getting the bulk of this pot to DV, that would just that could keep the DV category fully funded, as well as provide those services. Is that something the board wanted to try to accommodate all of?
So if you had 39 units, let's round it up to 40 units, and allocated 2,500 per household, and then they would set it up to where all you're doing is you're reimbursing direct expenses, so you're not putting money into anybody's pocket, you're just paying for expenses. I mean, maybe that's a way to try and make sure that, we're covering the cost of moving them, but we're not, it's not a slush fund. I don't want to create a slush
Everything
fund.
is awarded as reimbursement.
Okay.
So it's not like they would get X amount of money to move people. People would be moved, receipts would be presented and reimbursed.
The question's gonna fall, who is gonna be the agency that's going to put in for the request and manage that?
Well, I'll reach out to Jim, and it'd either be Community Frameworks or Habitat, because they're the two that are providing the low-income housing. So I can call Jim today and say, hey, talk to the guys and see which ones what's in the application.
It might be worthwhile reaching out to SNAP, because looking at their kind of menu of services, they might have non-county funds that are meant to help people as part of moving from one place to another, avoiding eviction and homelessness. We might be able to see, do you have a resource outside the county that could help with this group? Rather than, so that might be worth a call, so that they could actually just handle that on their own.
Right.
I gotta believe this is not the first time like Habitat has come across this issue.
Yeah, no,
This has gotta be something they've experienced before.
Just passing along a phone call. I didn't get into it any more than him saying, hey, we need funds. Okay, thanks. Anything else? Okay.
Broadband will be really quick.
Is the question, do we need to add, since
Yeah,
less is gonna be available, if this, I mean, that's where there's so many questions surrounding this. If less is gonna be available in the RFP process for domestic violence, would we increase the domestic violence category right now?
Like, do you want to go 1.1 million to the why now?
How much is their total ask?
Their total ask is 2,23,623. So if they receive everything out of this, they're still gonna be coming in about 1.9. So they're about 120,000 from being fully funded if they were to receive everything in this RFP.
Both.
Which we can't guarantee.
Which you can't guarantee at all. So if you wanted to beef that up, you could pick whatever, you could do 1.12 million. And then if they were to receive the rest of it, they would be fully funded. You could go 1.3 million if you want to target some of the RFP to relocation services. And I think you could make a decision today if you wanted to that, we could reach out to SNAP. And if we find another relocation pot of money, we leave it at just DV. If we don't find another pot of relocation money, we do not joint scoring preference. That would be one way to make a decision today that we could get it out this week without coming back around to you at another meeting.
And I'd really like to get it out this week. I mean, I'm all on board with that. What do you think about carving out 50,000 for relocation?
Just out of curiosity, are there any veterans that were being relocated?
Yes.
Because we have money in veterans services budget that we could, it's
Okay.
something that we could make an exception to assist with the relocation.
And federal veteran services usually has money, I know, with the homeless. No.
Not that I know of, not Fed VA, but in our emergency relief fund, we're way underspent. So it could be if there are any veterans in that group of 39 people, maybe we could reduce the amount you're looking for by the veterans. Just a
up.
I don't know.
Like, I guess I'm just, I don't know. I mean, I'd rather just make sure that if we're gonna do a separate RFP and, I mean, other people, anytime you put an RFP out, other people are gonna be putting in.
Oh, of course.
And scoring is gonna happen. So I guess I'd rather, knowing that there's other things like this coming, I'd rather make sure that some of the TV is taken care of, that we're not feeling like we've got to, they're forced into getting the.
So what number would you guys like to see for the Y?
So what's the total for that category?
The pot is 5 million.
And we're up
If
to
we fully
5.
fund the sheriff, that's 3.997. So we have 1.3 million before we go over, but we do have about 4.4 million completely unallocated. So,
Ultimately, we're gonna be able to fully fund everything.
you could fully fund the Y out of ARP if you chose, and then we do something different with this RFP. So I would just say, if you want to fully fund the Y, you need to add at least 120,000 to fully fund their full proposal. Because they're gonna be coming in at about 1.9 instead of 2,023,000.
In ARP.
That's assuming that they would be getting some ERA too. If you want to fund them completely in
Just fully funded.
Out of ARP.
ARP, you'd have to increase it by a
Out
million.
of ARP, because then this frees this up for other opportunities for the community. And it's only 100,000.
Well, 120,000 would fully fund them if you make an assumption that they're gonna score well in this category. and get
Okay,
the
so
category.
that's what
To
I'm
fully
trying to
fund
get.
them out of ARP, you need to add 1,020,000.
Yep.
Which you have, you can.
Yeah.
That's
I'm fine.
within the
I'm
bookends.
fine with that.
So we're saying just fully fund the Y out of ARP?
Yeah.
Then I would say then we would circle back around, instead of taking more time today, on different ideas for these categories 1 and 2. And have another discussion on options for them, or it could just stay for rental assistance. You don't have to do an RFP, but we'll do the RFP for the affordable housing.
Or, I guess, let's see, I'm second guessing. So
one
what
of
if
my-
we do 500,000 out of this?
Well, one of the things I was gonna, and I know it's a total guess at this, I know the feds aren't saying, but if they've already clawed back, so I gotta assume the rate of people coming in, outside the city of Spokane, because that's the funds that SNAP's for, I gotta assume that rate is really slowing down. People.
They informed me on Friday that they have a significant number of applications in the hopper that have grown recently because the city of Spokane closed their portal. They haven't had a chance to go through them yet.
But those people won't qualify for these dollars if they live in the
Correct.
city.
But they do have still a significant number of applications to go through.
We still
Okay.
1.4 a month.
Between the 3 pots, that's the last guesstimate they
So
gave
we're
us.
spending about 1.4 million a month between all 3 pots, ERAP, TRAP, and ERA. So you essentially have about 9 months of status quo funding left.
Do we know, and I'm sure SNAP could run this report for it, it's about, maybe it is about time we have SNAP come back in and sort of present to us, because it's like, how many of these people are first time coming in? Or are these people that, from the start of the pandemic, have been coming in every single month to get,
Between the 3, no individual can get more than 18 months.
18 months of assistance?
Correct.
Which can be multiple times.
Oh, hey, it's
So
a
SNAP
it's a
does
sweet
have to
deal
track
out
to
there.
ensure
my
that
God.
not one,
Yeah.
nobody is crossing
18
over.
A year and a half.
Just a signature.
Yeah,
Wow.
Santa Claus comes every month.
That's one thing that was missing from all the reporting.
Yes,
this weekend.
absolutely, yep.
Wow.
They have to be within 12 months for each of the programs, but they can cross over to not exceed 18.
You wonder why people don't want to go back to work?
Don't have to.
Don't have to.
So Heather and I chatted this morning around some of those data metrics that you were just referring to from SNAP. So of the 2,800, how many of those are going to be not eligible for the SNAP program? What is then the spend down over the last 3 to 4 months, so you can see trajectory, and then how many of them are repeat?
I would love to
people
see a breakdown of that.
So we'll work on getting that. We can schedule SNAP to come in and give an overview of the program.
Now I'll circle back around to what dollar amount are we gonna do for?
They're still averaging, it says
I'm
about
hearing
6
people
months
on
of
that, right?
rental assistance per person is still the average.
So I see I see Josh's concern is, so do we leave out a half, 500,000, because the RFP will be for 90,
Just shy of 897 and change, I believe.
which then allows for us to use that money, but yet have other money available. So maybe if we do,
1.5, 1.6 out of ARP
yes.
to the Y.
But I'm just thinking, if
And-
this
and
doesn't get
reduce it.
spent down, they come in and sweep it.
Sweep it.
And then it's
Yeah.
gone. It's the
So-
risk. We don't get
That's a possibility.
So I'm doing a balance of the two might be better.
So 500,000 out of this and the rest comes out of ARP.
Sure.
That's fine.
So if
Well,
you're,
that would leave then some money in the category 1 that would cover the relocation then.
Yep.
and we'll get other applications in around relocation and probably DV services. So, so if you're saying plan on 500,000 here, that means we would target getting to about 1.525 million. So we would be adding $522,000
Yes.
to the resolution to fund the Y at 1,525,000. There would also be an RFP that would go out that would allow them to compete for the remainder.
Yes.
And that will leave you at about 3.9 million-ish unallocated.
Okay.
Plus the other 100,000 we went over for the neighborhood features this morning, so let me take that down to 3.75 million.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have our direction.
That'll make the chicken scratch.
Okay.
I will do broadband in less than 2 minutes. So I have some good news. The Washington State Broadband Office hosted a study session related to the round 2 funding on Friday. It was 3 hours. It had about 40 attendees from counties, a smattering of cities, PUDs, nonprofits, tribal and general citizenry. I was extremely pleased at what occurred. Particularly in the county breakout, of which there were 3 attendees from King County who to date have not supported open access and some of the other original round 1 criteria. There was just exceptional conversation. A big shout out to Commissioner Hutzel from Lincoln County, who's really been a part of this from ground 1. And long story short, at the end of it, King County agreed unanimously that round 2 funding, getting out the door and preserving continuity as is, was more important than, and it was worth waiting to talk about open access in the future. So they actually supported keeping the criteria as is in order to get it out the door and follow the same precedents as the round 1 funding, knowing that that doesn't impact at all future notice of funding. So BEAD funding, which is another round of funding coming from the federal government, has embedded criteria to allow for private sector access. They realized that might be their opportunity to play in the non-open access space, but that could be later down the road. Mark Visconti, who's the broadband director, seemed to really take that to heart and had some very interesting challenge questions to the private sector providers that seemed to lead that it looked like that there was a lot of support for keeping things as is in the round 2 notice of funding. And he emailed me this weekend saying that he plans to have it out before the end of November, applications due before the end of January, and awards announcements before the end of February. So I felt there was a lot of progress in that 3-hour period. We are also motoring quite well with Mark and Scott on the PDA formation. I did print out the CURB study report to you because we are actually taking pieces of that for our PDA formation in our operating model. So there's I thought as you flip through it, namely how we operate as far as the concept of what's called dark fiber versus lit fiber, meaning there's glass ropes going down the road. ISP providers rent the dark strands and then take on the ownership of making those live and tending to the subscriber, which eases overhead and risk for the PDA. So we were originally contemplating the PDA doing all of that, and Scott had some great insights that that's just of our options, that's not what we want to do. So with Jim Amacio and Mark and Scott, we're really nailing down that structure to be able to have one-on-one conversations with you, with the formal briefing coming maybe the first week of December to look at formalizing that on a consent schedule. So lots going on there, but just wanted to let you know, I think we're about ready to have conversations with you with what's been developed.
One other thing, just to back up to these RFPs with the flexible money, we cannot issue the affordable housing capital RFP until the first RFPs have been awarded, because we won't get to that full 75% allocated until that happens. So if we get them out this week, they wouldn't be awarded till probably the Monday after Thanksgiving at the earliest. So we wouldn't be able to actually put the affordable housing, the category 3, on the street till early December. I don't think it matters to anybody, just kind of wanted to let you know that timing. We can't do category 3 till 1 and 2 have been allocated. So that would have us awarding that one probably early in January with the Christmas holidays.
So at some point, do we want to have a conversation about the governance structure, the PDA for broadband? So when can we tee that up?
Aaron and I talked last week after we reviewed the draft document right now. I think we're pinning that for the 4th, the first week in December.
I think it's the 5th, I can't remember. Yeah, Monday the 5th.
Okay.
That's what we were targeting for you.
Okay. Does that work for everybody? Okay.
I think so. I'll probably be at new elected training, but I'll be zooming in.
Okay. Would a better time work for you then?
I think we're gonna be between now and the holidays, we're gonna just be slammed. So it's just gonna be whatever it is.
Okay. Trying to figure out how to fit all that stuff in, because you got comp plan amendments coming, you've got budget stuff coming, there's a number of other items, public hearing wise.
As you know, I can't, if I don't win my reelection, then I'm not WASAC president, so. There's a lot of, ifs until November 8th or thereafter it happens.
You guys are welcome to look at the draft document as it stands and what's sketched out, either with Scott or myself, we can show that to you informally before the 5th.
I'm sure we'll do it in our spare time.
Yeah.
All righty, so that completes yours?
Yes.
Mr. Petrovich, you're up.
All right. Tessa, do you want to sit down here?
I gotta run the computer.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, well, thank you, Commissioner. In today's budget workshop, we hope to cover a couple of things. The first thing that you should have in front of you are some recap worksheets that show what we have to date for supplemental requests dealing with capital. And then secondarily, a drafted new policy, slight change in policy for putting aside some reserves in our general fund. So which would you like to take on first?
I know that it matters, just you know.
Why don't we dispose of the general fund balance policy first?
Okay.
Usually, best practice established by the GFOA is to have at least a couple of months of operating expenses in your general fund covered in some type of restricted reserve. Currently, we have a committed reserve policy that shows 10% balance. We would recommend that we change that to 16.7% of the adopted budget, because that represents the 2 months that we're striving for as a minimum committed reserve level. And in this general fund balance policy, you'll notice that it outlines, and thank you, Tessa, for putting this together too, what happens if you need to use those funds if it drops below those minimum levels. And it calls for a plan to be included to replenish those funds within 3 years. However, if it can't be done within that period because of severe hardships, then the board has the ability to establish a more appropriate time period. But this really kind of sets the table a little bit in the start of our budgeting process to show that if we are in fact wanting to get to that recommended 2-month level, we need to increase our contribution to that contributed amount. And that contribution would amount to approximately, it would take us from about 24 million up to 38 million. So about $14, $15 million would be then taken from the general fund current expense, non-committed or unallocated to a committed status.
And this came up during our recent rating reviews as well with the small arms range. The rating agencies appreciated where our reserves are at today, but they do like to, in keeping with our AA+ rating and our A- rating with Moody's, they look to having those designated into a committed, which are for specific uses into the future. So this would also be in line with what their feedback was to us.
So when was the last policy that was done that it set the 10%? What year was that?
2011.
2011. And how much is our, what was, I guess, it was 10%, then did that equate at that time to 2.5 months or 2 months?
No, because it just, the percentage, if you equate that to a particular month, each month is 1/12, and so 8 point.
No, I'm just asking the question, so it doesn't, okay.
So
So you were,
yeah, I was here when we did that, and we went to 10% because the rating agency said that if we wouldn't contribute and commit at least 10%, our rating was at risk of dropping. And so that became part of the board's initiative to really start to build up our reserves so that we could get, one, guarantee that our rating wouldn't drop, but also so that we start working toward where we can improve the rating. So the 10% was like a minimum, and that was just to keep us from getting a reduction in rate.
And the things the rating agencies look to in terms of the policy is that you're not going to use it for ongoing types of expenditures to plug budget gaps willy-nilly. And so having that set aside gives them some confidence level. And also that you're going to be contemplative in the use of those restricted funds. And that just shows a commitment to being financially astute.
so is that already in the policy that we have, the restrictions for it? So my question is are we having to do a new policy, or do we just change the percentage on the old policy?
Well, you would change some of the verbiage to go along with that percentage change.
Okay, so can we have a copy of that policy and?
No, that's not it. So we can do we could take the recommendations and redline the existing policy. And the existing policy, the 10%, I believe, was based on revenues.
Correct.
Yeah, so every year then, based on that policy, the auditor's office adjusts the committed general fund reserves to that policy.
Okay, so that was based on revenues.
So that's based on
not-
revenue. So this would be then 2 months of operating expenses, which equates to about 16.7%.
And I guess to me, it just seems like, I mean, the board approved that policy in the past, and if we want to change it, I'd like to see kind of from a red line status, what those changes are.
And to give you some additional information, we were in such a poor situation back then. We were actually having to borrow from the treasury at least 2 to 3 times a year just to meet payroll and stuff. So the reserves were so low that we couldn't even meet payroll.
Right, because of waiting for property taxes to come in on that.
Yeah,
Get a twice-a-year
yeah.
cycle,
So our
yeah.
reserves would drop way down low and then we'd have to borrow.
Good. So if we're all in agreement, we'll get that red line copy and get it teed up for the future, for future adoption of the new policy.
Yeah, I would say get the red line copy and bring it back for us to have a discussion.
Just throw out for your consideration, you know, and instead of the 16.7, which is just basically 2 months of operating, do we want to consider maybe bumping that to 20% so that if we have to tap it, we can tap it without threatening, you know, our minimum kind of a deal is, and maybe we covered that in the language, I don't know, but just throw it out for your consideration, not big campaign forward, but, you know, just for what it's worth. And well, maybe that's part of the conversation when we come back and review the policy. So.
One thing I think that would help to inform on that conversation is kind of to the point that was made earlier around having to borrow if we don't have enough operating margin within our fund balance. Because of the timing of collecting property taxes, we may show, after this gets set aside, we may show that our unassigned is, say, 25 million. But by the time you get to March, beginning of April, it could be down to that 2 to 3 million. So we'll bring back and kind of show you what that differential could be that we want to keep in the unassigned to allow us to manage cash flows through the year.
So one of the other reserve accounts we set up at the county or at the city, and this was really, so I went down to Boise because Boise was, you know, the gold standard for financial management back in the early 2000s. And I sat through a whole week of their budgeting process, and they had a number of reserve accounts. One of them they classified as the rainy day account, so that if revenues came in above projection, which is kind of what we're experiencing right now, they would take that additional money and they would put it in the rainy day fund because, you know, the revenue is up and down, and so they wouldn't tap that until revenue started to drop. Then they tapped the rainy day so that they could try and level out and get a smooth curve through their operating cycle. I thought that was, they used that as a way to avoid having to tap into their designated reserve account so that they didn't threaten their credit rating. And I thought that was a good policy, and we adopted it over the city, and I've mentioned it a couple of times here at the county that we ought to do the same thing here, or at least consider it. So throw that out for your consideration.
So maybe there's a two-pronged approach, Commissioner, is target the 2 months for the committed and then look to see whether there's opportunities to put something in kind of an assigned rainy day type of a fund as well with excesses that could help kind of level future budgets.
Yeah, and you know, in the 90s and 2000s, we were in and out of recessions a number of times. You know, we've not had a recession to deal with here for the last decade. So the sensitivity to it is not as great today as it was, you know, 2 decades ago.
But could be.
But it could
sensitivity
be,
into
you know,
next
there's
year.
a new day tomorrow.
Yep.
So, anyway.
I've seen some counties do this, Commissioner. They'll call it a rainy day fund, and it's funded from the turn back from prior years for general fund current expense, right? And some of them stipulate that as a percentage of that estimated turn back, so that there's that cushion that you can operate from.
Okay.
So we can craft some type of verbiage that addresses that too. But it would probably, like Scott said, be a two-pronged thing. We'd address the committed or restricted reserve in one policy and then establish via a new board resolution a rainy day fund.
right? And do we have, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Well,
Is there another policy for that?
so I was sharing with them that when I was with the city, we, the recessionary cycle was much more frequent than we've seen over the last decade. And so I spent a week with Boise as they were going through their budget cycle, and they established a designated reserve, and then they also established a rainy day reserve. And the rainy day reserve was if they budgeted revenues for a specific year and they came in above the projection for revenues, they put that in the rainy day fund so that when they got into a recessionary period, they would tap the rainy day fund before they tapped the designated reserve, because the rainy day fund was found money basically and stuff. And what they were trying to do is get to a smooth curve in terms of revenues and expenses and stuff. And so we did adopt that over the city of Spokane. I don't know how religious they've been in terms of funding it, but I always thought that would be a good way for us to manage those reserves as well. So I just threw it out for conversation.
We just gotta be careful we've been very conservative on our revenue estimates.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like then you can get into where if you're designating all of that to go into a rainy day fund, you're kind of hurting yourself too. So I mean, it's just, it's that balance of how conservative on the revenue numbers and like, as we've seen the last 3 years, how much they've come in. So that would just be my only caution, but just, thing to really be thinking about how that's.
I mean, you use part of that additional revenue to cover capital expenses that you otherwise didn't have budgeted and stuff. So I mean, there's a balance, and I don't know what that balance is. I'm just making an observation.
Yeah, or kind of say, we would put this much of it in, and the rest would stay, unrestricted or something like that. Just some things to think about, for those cases when you've underestimated revenues.
And you can leg that determination of what goes into the rainy day fund by predicating it on the prior year's audited financial statement. So you know exactly what surplus, if you have any, from that year is, and then make the decision on how much or percentage that you want to put in after that point. So you know you've already got it in the bank.
Or it could be like the state where no revenue, none of revenue is enough, and you still take the rainy day fund.
Eat them up at the same time.
Did you get it? Had you gotten
Well,
it? That's the, no, it wasn't in the stack, but there's the resolution you were asking.
Well, and the rainy day fund could be totally a discretionary fund, so that, it's not driven by formula, it's driven by discretion. So.
And that's the one in red line.
No, if you want to read it now, which you can't.
The red line will be good. That's what I want to see is the red line version.
All right, very good. Anything else? Okay, Gary,
All
back
right,
to
now
you.
you want to jump into the eye charts. This is what you've got before you are 3 sheets that just show the submission of capital supplemental requests for 23. And these are done by department here. You can see that it's split out. We have different categories that read across for potential funding sources and funding options. There's quite a bit there to go through. And I don't know how you would like to start approaching it, but we can just go from the top, or if you'd like a preference on where you'd like to start, we can start there. We can start anywhere you'd like to address.
So is this the spreadsheet that I asked you to put together for it? So when I was briefing, I think last week with Gary and Scott and stuff, there's so many projects and there's so many funding opportunities. I asked him to do a spreadsheet that listed all the different funding opportunities, and then we could pick and choose how we wanted to marry these things up and stuff. So thank you for doing that. And I get to fill in the box.
Just thank the staff for that. They did a great job putting that together. And on the last category there, you'll see grants. If we need to flesh that out with any more discernment area, is here to help that process get.
I just want to make sure I understand how the spreadsheet's put together. So we've got in 2023 a total of all the projects of 34 million.
Correct.
If I go to the very last page, and then if I look, I guess I'm trying to see then in total where the revenue, Cause I'm not really,
I think the revenue's at the top of the columns.
okay, so of the 34 million, 1.2 could come from REIT.
Yeah.
Or REIT 1.
And then read 2, and then revenue replacement. That's how I read the spreadsheet. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, so that's the revenue available.
So we still have 25 million that we don't know how, we don't have a revenue source for.
And that's where the grants is kind of a general placeholder. Those are grants that we have managed by Heather. Those are grants that we are thinking about, like a state's supplemental capital request for maybe some of our other things. They're things that are external to the county that we could pursue as options for these requests, not knowing whether or not they'll materialize.
And keep in mind, the 2023 is everyone's request. Didn't necessarily have an expectation that all of it would be
Right.
funded.
Yeah.
And then what's not called out here is what amount you might want to utilize out of general fund unassigned in here as well. So that's a category that is highlighted above, but doesn't have a specific amount of dollars that are set there because it's really up to the board's discretion on that.
And the order in which they're appearing under the departments is their prioritization.
Okay. So what this doesn't do, I guess for me, is that part of what we're doing is saying, okay, so like with animal control, it's like, I mean, seeing what the funding sources could be, because so I mean, we really haven't identified for each one of these what funding sources are even available.
And we could walk each of those, if the desire is to invest in some of the scraps thing, we'll guide you to say, okay, you could utilize some REIT 1 or 2 if that's available. You can utilize some indirects. You could utilize some general funds. So we can guide through where some of those eligible uses are based on the desired prioritized investments that you want to make.
Yeah, when I met with Gary, I was having trouble saying, okay, you could use this, you could do this, you could do this, and I'm kind of going, wait a minute, how do I put all that into a package? So they gave us, well, they gave me, I'm assuming they gave it to you too, the description of what REIT 1 and what REIT 2 could cover. So I figured, okay, I'll go through REIT 1, REIT 2 and say, how much of this can I cover with that? How much of it can I cover with revenue replacement? And fill in the blanks. I was just trying to figure out a way for me to go through and try and fund as much of what we need to be funded and where it was going to come from. Otherwise, I'd get lost with all the different sources of revenue.
Right.
So it might be helpful to take a look at everything that's being requested, but to take a look briefly at the 3 pages and start with what you think your priorities would be.
My priorities aligned with, and I assume you two got the same list. When I met with Gary, he gave me the 2023 capital project shortlist, and I mean that had most of one. I mean, I think these are good ones we should take care of and try to knock these off as soon as possible. Just the timeliness. Fair and Expo Center, I think the roof has to be replaced. The HVAC system has to be fixed.
Yeah.
I think that is something we need to take care of. The ERP system, is another one, but we've essentially where it's the interest,
Revenue
or
replacement.
revenue replacement, I'm sorry,
Yep.
not interest.
And then you'll
revenue
see it,
replacement.
4 million at the bottom of that revenue replacement column, and that would be the remainder of the ERP system for 2024.
On the
So that would be a
second page.
carryover, yep.
Okay, yep. So we have an identified revenue spot for that.
Commissioner, I think you
Yep.
brought up a good point. Revenue replacement and indirects follow the same utilization calendar that regular ARP awards do. They're not an award, but we do have to report on that and be zeroed out by 2026. So that's just a good little caveat.
All right. Then I was thinking with REIT capacity, because we have so many millions sitting there, or I'm sorry, the fund balance of REIT. I was thinking on this list, I mean, there's a lot of park stuff on here that's, I mean, comparatively low dollar amount to other things. I mean, Liberty Lake Regional Park, paving and parking, paving in the park, 630. The Bear Lake, 1.58, but I know we're also we're up for several grants. I don't know if we've heard back on those, if anybody knows. I know there's several grants we're up for a larger project at Bear Lake, but then you look at, Shields Park renovation enhancement, 300,000. Holmberg Linwood Tennis Court renovation for pickleball, 425. Liberty Lake Park rental cabin construction phase 1, 60,000. Yeah, I mean, we could cash fund all those out of our fund balance of REIT 1 and get a lot of things knocked off this list. So
You do have quite a bit of capacity in the available fund balance in REIT 1.
And all the park stuff is REIT 2 eligible, isn't it?
is all of it or just some?
Some of it.
Okay. But I think we cash fund some of those out of REIT and don't use REIT in a way where we're gonna, spread it out over a number of years. I mean, let's just fund some of these out of the REIT fund balance and get them done.
The grant column under, if you're looking at parks, that identifies what we believe we'll be receiving in grants today. So if you look at Bear Lake, for example, 2.963.
Yeah.
We believe we're in line for 1.38 million in grants, which leaves a balance of 1.6 rounding. So that project balance category is kind of the remaining unidentified funds that would come from one of the categories up above.
Yeah, and I think if I remember, I think Doug was pretty confident we would score well in those. But I guess based on this, we still don't know yet. Correct. Whether we proceed.
Some of them are probably a little farther along than other ones are. In the Fair and Expo category, Tessa had mentioned this earlier, under revenue replacement, that's the commissioners had identified ERP and then countywide facilities. So right now, we're just going on the high side of where the RFP may come back from for ERP. And so we're indicating up to $8 million for ERP. And we put the differential into the Fair and Expo as a targeted priority, which then leaves a balance of 2.863 million. Just to explain how that was done here.
I'm gonna have to take off
Yeah.
here.
So this is a good starting point. Anything else before Commissioner Cooney has to leave?
No, just this helps, I think, encapsulate the issues that we need to make decisions on. And if the priority is to first use, like a REIT 1, if it's applicable, or REIT 2, and then go down the list, then for other sources, revenue replacement and general fund use, that's probably the sequencing of it.
Okay.
So yeah, I have to take off. I'll be unavailable for a little bit and then available
11:30.
11:37.
Yep.
We're scheduled.
Okay.
Okay, I will go see if I can make it all happen.
So maybe a suggestion to help you. Here's the categories that Commissioner French had asked for, so it's kind of visual. Commissioner Kearns just mentioned some of those, kind of an early checklist on some of those priorities. We could put those in here kind of seed the thoughts and show where it might be utilized at and what might be left available to help kind of the ongoing dialogue around capital decisions that you want to make for 2023. It's just the 2023 call that we focused on for you all.
Okay.
And then we can send the document as a working document so you all could edit and manipulate and see how you'd like to change things around yourselves.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and then we can come back to you too with some revised balances after we address the supplemental funds going into committed reserves. And so we'll give you a status update on that, predicated on, like you said, putting in those priority capital requests so you see what available monies you have.
Okay. Sounds good.
On the capital reserve, if we do a red line, review it with you next Monday and then have it on consent, which if you're not ready to, we could pull it off, but then you'll have the red line in front of you to be able to look at. We'll run through it on Monday, then possible action on Tuesday. Does that work? Cool.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good.
Very good. That gets us to miscellaneous.
We do have, I think the commissioners have done this in the past, declaring a small business week for our community. There was a request, there was a request from an organization by the name of
on the front there,
Small Business Saturday Coalition, Women Impacting Public Policy. I believe they're asking for something to declare the week.
Proclamation.
Yeah, a proclamation for like the third week in November. So I don't recall, quite honestly, if it's something that we've done on behalf of the local community, or if the commissioners have just declared a proclamation. So we can pull something out of past proclamations and see if that's something that you want to do as well for this year.
Okay.
Small Business Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah.
Small Business Saturday. That's what it is. I think it's the.
Have we done this before,
Sat-
Jared? It sounds
I've
familiar.
been racking my brain. I mean, we did Ignite, but
Yeah, we've done it. I don't know that we've done it recently, so it's possible we did it before Josh got here. I think it was something that even maybe Commissioner Richard championed, but I could be wrong. Okay. Anything else for go to the cause with regard to miscellaneous?
I don't think so. Kyle's going to be bringing a briefing with the upcoming pending winter season to share with the commissioners what the snow operations looks like. So we can share with you, share with the community, and likely have some sort of possible snow ops briefing at one of our district offices as well. So that'll be coming, I think the weekend after the Thursday recess, the Thanksgiving recess. One of those T words.
So the week before last, we had the representative locally for the National Weather Service come into the airport board and give an update on the kind of winter that we can expect and what days it's going to snow and what days it's not going to snow. So you might want to reach out to the airport and get whatever kind of wisdom came out of that if you want. We use it as a guide to regulate how much, de-icer we buy and all that kind of stuff in anticipation of the kind of winter we're going to have. To any value, yes,
Well,
Josh?
according to the experts at Apple, or whoever runs their app on the phone, says possible 40% chance of snow on Monday, a week from today. So that's what, I hope it's wrong.
Snow or slush.
It's got the little snowflake on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, going from 30 to 50 to 60% over those 3 days.
So
I hope they're wrong.
So what the representative for the Weather Bureau said was that we will probably anticipate getting more precipitation this year than in previous years, but the majority of the cold weather snow is going to be in the mountains, not necessarily in the valley. And they were anticipating that we would have 4 significant snow events here in the county, meaning there's for stay-at-home days because there's gonna be too much snow on the road. Kind of a deal.
Martha Lou has also reached out, asking for dates to do to do a ribbon cutting for the next phase of Bigelow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so coordinate those with the weather too. I guess.
3 weeks in advance.
Yeah. So, yeah, her
Subject to
email,
change.
her email was like, any dates near the end of November? And I'm thinking, oh my God, like, okay.
Do you wanna do a cutting for that phase?
I mean, everything at Bigelow is huge for
yeah.
the region. I mean,
Huge,
that's
yeah.
a major project. I really think we
Yeah.
need to celebrate
It looks great.
all of them. It just sucks. It's this time of year.
It's gonna be late.
Yeah.
Well, especially since this is gonna be the last phase.
No,
This is the solid phase. At the
Yeah.
very end.
Oh, it's just a
one
ribbon
more
cutting.
left.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah.
But when we open
Okay.
it to traffic, it'd be nice to do so.
Okay, so it's 11:15. Why don't we take a recess for 15 minutes and then we will be going into executive session at 11:30. And the executive session will include our senior management team, Mark McLean. What?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but Mary's gonna come back at 11:30.
But Mary's not here. Yeah, so Sheriff, we're gonna go into recess for 15 minutes. And then Mary will be back at that time and then we'll go into executive session. And so we'll go into executive session 11:30 and we'll include our senior management team, all three commissioners, Mark McLean and Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. And we'll be in executive session for approximately 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 20 minutes. And on pending and potential litigation. So, and then when the executive session is over, we do not anticipate the decision will be made today. So when the executive session is over, we will be adjourned until tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Okay? All right. So.